and all your crew, and it's why there is an Academy of Television, an Academy
Right.
of Television Arts and Sciences. It's not, hey, let's go roll off some footage.
Right.
But it's like it's like so important that.
Okay.
Real three.
Yeah.
Louis J. Horvitz, director at large, out of body experience.
Right. Okay. When you take on a project, at what point do you get involved with pre-production, and is it do you get in there enough to your satisfaction to be involved in the pre-production?
In today, November 13, 2008, a director's position in television for a given project, whether it be live or to tape, whether it be an award show, whether it be a Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs variety compilation, whatever the case may be, usually the last person hired is the director. By the time a company knows that they're going to do a show, the first people to know are the lighting company because they need the equipment. Next comes the video trucks because they need the video trucks. Then comes the crews because they're always doing multiple things. And oh yeah, by the way, we should get a director. And then the director comes in. So in answer to the pre-production, it's just how it is. And I've always said this, I never have to be the first choice. I'm not a proud man. I love the need for speed. I love to direct live. I really love to direct, so I don't need to be the first choice. If somebody is available, I'll go in there and do it. Now, when they tell me what it is they have in mind, depending on the relationship that I have with that producer, some producers kind of want to lay it all out themselves and bring you in as the director closer a week or two before you're actually going to make the picture. However, in the meantime, you're on the phone with the executive in charge of production, setting crews, okaying crews, what teleprompter are right now the most important single thing on the minds of everybody making a television show today are the fucking seat kills. That's what's important. How many seats are we going to block when we make this television show? Is there line of sight when you make this television show? Can you tell us where the cameras go even before you know what the show's going to be, what the set's going to be, and what we're going to do? Believe me, I did this way back when, so it's not hard to do. When we were doing the Bee Gees in 1979 with Steve Burum, we did it with 22 Panavision cameras. We had camera cars, we had airplanes. We went to Oakland Stadium on the Bear Arena floor, and here was the first lesson I learned from a great DP, Steve Burum. When they asked the question, where are the cameras going? We don't know where the set is. There's nothing there. What seat should we buy right now? Steve said, buy the entire orchestra right now. Then we'll come in, we'll put up a set, we'll put the cameras there, and whatever's left, you can sell. And that's exactly what happened. If I would give that answer today to the Academy, John Schaffner might say, I think we need a new director. But the seat kills, that's like part of the pre-production. And, I can understand this because it generates income, because the academies today, Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, ADIS, Grammys, American Film Institute, they're really non-profit in the sense that you get a licensing fee, and out of that you've got to live the rest of the year with your film preservation or doing these interviews or whatever it is that continues to keep these important academies going. It's not, that television show is the number one, fundraiser. So pre-production could be anywhere a month out, it could be a week out. But there are questions that have to be answered all along the way. So where it sounds like you're not involved, there's not a day that doesn't go by on every given show that there isn't a phone call pertaining to some form of pre-production.
Generally, for the shows that you've done that have post-production, were you involved in post-production? Like live-to-tape shows, variety shows, concert shows, where there was, post?
There are shows that I do annuals that I've been fortunate enough to do, like the American Film Institute for some 20-odd years. I'm getting ready to leave shortly. We're going to go to Washington for a phenomenal show, the Kennedy Center Honors, with George Stevens Jr., Michael Stevens, his son, and Allie Gifford, one of the other producers. And at the Kennedy Center, that is recorded and edited. And absolutely, I will go to post-production on those two particular shows because, in a way, they are important in terms of how you have to mold the cutaway shot. The length could be an hour long, how it gets cut down. Ultimately, the final cut will be with the producer, George Stevens, Michael, and ultimately it will be with, let's say, Bob Gazzali, although he's now CEO and president. But the point is, it is my job as the director to get that into some sort of a form, director's first cut. Again, I have to relate back to my film training, and I get it ready for them. And that takes usually 4 or 5, 6, 7 days, and then they'll come into town, and I probably won't even see them. I'll probably just say, I'll watch the show on TV, because at that point it becomes the producer's cut. And it's not much unlike when John Ford would shoot and Daryl Zanuck would recut his film. I found that for me to stay in an edit bay after I've done my cut, and then really the ultimate authority is the producer comes in and wants to fine-tune it, it's all very subjective at that time. Whether I'm going to be on Steve right now, whether I'm going to be on Lou, or whether that cutaway shot is a good cutaway shot, why stay there and quibble and have opinion, because it's only one opinion. It's the guy who's going to actually own it and put it on. So it ends up in the studio hand. So I do edit shows that I've shot specifically, recorded. However, these shows I also shoot like a live show. I call the shots, I cut it live, and it's important because I need to know that although all the cameras are rolling, 10, 11, and 12 cameras on some of these shows, by calling the shot, by making sure that I'm on headset going, okay, get ready for the standing ovation. Now let me remind you, I need for you to hold the head of the shot for 10 to 15 seconds in case I want to put the line that I'm saying now underneath you listening and then watching you rise. And then once you sit down, I want you to count to 20 before you change your frame, because in order to be able to direct shows that are going to be edited, you have to be a master editor. And again, early in my career, when there was only linear editing, not non-linear editing, where we can change it like that, I had to make sure that I came back with the footage. And where I learned to come back with that footage was from Don Misher, because he did bring me into the AFI, and George Stevens Jr., and he did bring me into the Kennedy Center. And it was his book that he passed to me, and he goes, here are the 10 most important things you can do, and I will need when we go to edit this show. And believe me, until I read those, I never would have done that, because I would have thought a 5-second tail pad or 5-second head pad would have been enough. But the way they edited a 2-hour show that was an hour long, they would take 3 words from you and then 2 more words from you and then 5 words, and they would make 5 edits to make the first sentence to get you into, I'm really glad to be here to salute James Brown at the Kennedy Center. So if you didn't have a shot that lasted for 7 or 8 seconds, you'd have a series of cut after cut after cut. It's very complex. And again, I defy, people consider me a live event director, but I just have to say I'm one hell of an editor. I do like to edit, and I know how to edit, and most importantly, I was taught by the masters. And then second to that, like Thelma Schumacher works for Marty Scorsese. I got a guy named Mike Polito that edits for me, and he's a killer editor. And if you've got a great editor and you're going to have an edited show, you got to have somebody who knows how to do it.
sometime around the mid-'80s, variety shows on television were on the wane and tended to disappear from primetime schedules. Why do you think that is?
Variety shows disappearing off the horizon in the 80s. For a few reasons, I think. MTV came along, and I Want My Music Television changed the face of how people watched and listened to music. They suddenly became more enthralled in watching a video to the song than they did watching the band come on television in the variety format and perform it, because they were being titillated by what I call the production designer's medium in videos. And that was 65 takes, 17 different outfits, pour syrup on them, break pillows over them, shoot them out of a cannon, drop an airplane on them, make an atomic bomb, make it psychedelic, make it anything to do with anything but the song, if you at all possibly can. And that's why music television, music TV, music television videos changed the face of variety television. If you were to watch MTV, which was my buddies Tom Fresden and John Sykes and all those guys, and Bill and all those guys, if you were to see the way that they were doing that, they saved so much money because they had young filmmakers, they had production designers who knew how to build these sets, and then they had talent who didn't really have to go out on the road or go on any television show, just spend, 4 or 5 days, dancing and then putting on costumes and lip syncing. And so once that, all the kids started watching that, who wants to see them? The only place they could see them after that was American Bandstand, maybe, Saturday Night Live, a performance maybe. But that was just one of the elements of it. Now people were more sophisticated because they could get a video camera. A lot of the kids that are in this room right now, they only grew up on the computer age. They only grew up on being able to get their hands on a video camera and go out. And I made my first 8mm film, when I was 14 years old, and I got my grandfather's 16mm Bell and Howell ratcheted off 50-foot 16mm and played it back on a projector that he happened to want and have to document the family. But in the early 80s, everybody could get their hands on it. And again, as I said earlier, there was video assist, so you could it was fun to kind of as a hobby make your own films. So that became music video, MTV, then it became you could do it yourself, and then becomes, I think, the next most important aspect of how the face of television changed. Suddenly, great writers and actors were doing film episodic 1-hour television shows. Dick Wolf in L.A. Law, or Law and Order, excuse me. Suddenly, today it was Mad Men. Then it was, a 1-hour dramatic mini film so that you didn't have to wait for the films to come out. Every week you could see it. It was Dallas. It was Flamingo Road with my friend Morgan Fairchild. Because what were they? They were the sophisticated film episodic Peyton Place, if you will, that you look forward to watching every week because they were dramatic and they were scripted. And so when you could get enamored with that character, you weren't watching daytime soap operas now, you were watching nighttime soap operas. And if you look at the lay of the land now, as many reality shows as we think that we have out there, take a look at what's really going on out there now. There's many more 1-hour, really great film episodics. One last thing to add to it, going a little bit farther and deeper, came the advent of cable television. And once you got into cable television, and John Malone built the box that went on everybody's set and gets, a lot of money every time you flip a station, ultimately 500 stations. Once cable came in, HBO, Showtime, they could get subscriber television. They had no rules or regulations. They had no censorship. It was definitely for not the common man because you needed to have money to buy it. But that changed the face of why we don't see musical variety anymore, because there were other places and other things to see.
Okay. I want to mention just a couple of other shows you worked on, just for a quick comment or response. 1990 Diet America Challenge. I
saw that in the 42-page questionnaire you said we were going to be doing here, and we're on page 3 now. I had to go look that one up on the internet database on myself, and I know that I did it. And I would have to think that it might have been a Dick Clark production, and I probably did the wraparounds in a studio in which Oprah Winfrey and I don't know who else was on there, but there were 4 or 5 really important figures that talked about the issue of weight in America, and it was way ahead of its time. I wish I'd have listened to it. I would be eating donuts all the time now. But at that time, I was young and thin, and I think I did the wraparounds for it. But it was ahead of its time, definitely. If it was done in '89, that's what that was.
1991, A Party for Richard Pryor.
Now, that was really a very special period. George Schlatter was the producer. He was the producer of a show called Laugh-In. We attempted to give you a taste of that in this year's Emmy when Ken Ehrlich tried to bring back the Laugh Wall, and we brought some of the players back, Lily Tomlin and Alan Seuss and Ruth Buzzy and Joanne Worley and such. But George Schlatter was at NBC. It was 1969, I know, because it was one of the first shows that when I went on summer relief, I shot camera on and pulled cable on it. So when I shot the joke wall in 2008, I remember that I'd also shot the joke wall in 1969. And so George Schlatter was the consummate showman at that time. That was his first big project. And then he had a great relationship with Frank Sinatra. He was the bouncer at one of the clubs, Jilly's, that Frank frequented. And so we were at a period where George was doing homage to Richard Pryor, Muhammad Ali, and Frank Sinatra's 80th birthday celebration, stuff like that. And Richard Pryor was one of those, and he'd already set himself on fire, and he was, I think, had his disease. And George was adamant about, before these people, like we're recording something here tonight, before these people were, passed into eternity, that he gave them a moment. And Richard Pryor was one of those, and it was a dynamite lineup of people that showed up for him. And he was very moved. And it was a roast, it was a toast, and just everybody came out for Richard. God bless him.
In 1995, Rosie O'Donnell tries something new. What was that experience like?
What was the date?
95.
In 95, I think she tried heterosexuality, if I'm not mistaken.
This might have been the late night show that
Cut that out, will you? No, I know exactly.
Was this a show?
I know exactly.
Was this a show after Mad TV premiered, and then the Rosie? No, different show. Okay.
No. This was Rosie O'Donnell's first stand-up show for HBO.
All right.
I was skiing up in Aspen, and I got a call that Rosie was doing this stand-up, and she hated her producers. And it wasn't Chris Albrecht. It was, I don't remember who I was, Betty Bitterman, or one of the people I was responsible to at HBO, because we were doing concerts for cable now. Said, could you do me a big favor and fly to Las Vegas, look at her show, go in there, take it over. She's going to do it in Atlantic City, and just produce it and direct it. It's going to be a 1-hour stand-up comedy show for Rosie O'Donnell. And I'm going, I'm skiing. I mean, I don't really want to. First off, I already did Fernwood tonight, and I don't want to deal with the comedians. And as a favor, I'll put you in the plane. I'll put you in the HBO plane and fly you there. And I'm not name dropping. I'm just telling you really exactly like it was and where I stood. I stood like, if I was on the ski slope, there was no way I wanted to go do a television show. But I wish I could remember who it was. It was maybe, I don't think it was, it's hard to say who it was, Betty Bitterman maybe. At any rate, Michael Fuchs. It was Michael Fuchs. And so, at any rate, they put me he goes, you'll go up there, you'll talk to her, you'll be back on the slopes in 24 hours. I go up there, she's doing a routine in one of the Vegas showrooms. I look at the whole routine. Yeah, we can do a show on it. I stay, I go into her dressing room. She's a tough cookie. I got all the tough cookies. I got her and Roseanne Barr in the same year. And managed to get along because I just really basically listened to what it is she wanted and heard her rant and rave about what she hated, about what she had, who she'd picked to produce, who she'd picked to direct. And I'm not going to go into who that was or anything like that. But and she goes, do you think you can do this? And I go, I wanted to say, well, I'm skiing right now, but maybe. And I said, yeah, we can do this. So I flew back. I saw Michael. And I go, she wants to do this like in 2.5 weeks. I go, I don't really have a production company. I'm just shooting. I'm just directing. I mean, I'll throw it together if you want me to. And he goes, I want you to. And so I did. And we threw a production company together. We flew to Philadelphia. And we got her set and we put it all together. We shot her stand-up. Her stand-up went on HBO. She was a massive hit. HBO was indebted. And then they decided somewhere along the line they were going to give Rosie her own talk show. And she and I hit it off. And when she wanted to do her talk show, she asked me to do that. And I said I would help her get it started. And in fact, I did do that. I got her started on her talk show. And the rest is kind of history. She's kind of a misunderstood girl. She's incredibly bright, incredibly funny, incredibly smart, and incredibly micromanaging. So that's Rosie. Bless you, Rosie.
How did you come to direct the Academy Awards, the Oscars in 1997? I think that was the first year.
It was the 69th. I don't know what year it was, but it was the 69th Oscars.
97.
97?
Yeah.
In 97, how did I come to direct the Oscars? I was directing the Emmys. And I was nominated for an Emmy. And Jeff Margolis was the director of the Oscars. And he, too, was nominated for an Emmy. I was nominated for the Kennedy Center Honors. He was nominated for the Oscars. There was a producer, and still is, who was an incredible man and my closest friend, ally, and mentor. I can never say enough about Gilbert Cates. And Gil, he knew me peripherally, my work, and he asked permission to come into the truck and watch me direct the Emmys. And for what reason, I didn't know at the time. The Academy told me about it and asked if it would be all right, and I said, sure. I mean, I think Gil's great. To be quite honest, I really didn't watch the Academy Awards very much because I had a boat and we were down in the Grand Bahamas and I was sports fishing at that time of year. And I remember being in, Bimini and some bars or something like that and watching the international feed of it. I wasn't much of a... I watched films, but I wasn't studying films anymore. So there was kind of, if I wasn't directing it, there wasn't kind of any reason for me to be watching television. I had, other interests. And at any rate, getting back to that Emmys, Gil asked to come in the truck. And before the show started, he came and back by the truck. And he introduced himself to me. And I said, well, of course I know how you are. And he goes, you know something? He goes, I got to ask you something. I'm just, I'm a film director. I said, oh, I know you are. I mean, I never sang for my supper, oh God. I mean, I'd followed Gil. And he said, I'll tell you something. He goes, I just don't understand how you can use the Steadicam, strangely enough, so freeform. When I'm doing it on film, we got to plan every single move and we got to have a focus puller. But I watched you and you just take that thing and it just does everything. He goes, can I watch it work? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything you want. So, he gets in the truck, and I think this is exactly what happened. And they go, the nominees are, and the winner is, and I won the Emmy. and Jeff didn't. And then Gil was behind me, and I did my speech, and then he, after we went to commercial, it's delayed gratification. Thank you very much. I think I've won this Emmy. I'm in the truck directing. You're not. Hello to Lou and Claire Horvitz of Van Nuys, California. That's my mom and dad. And then they're telling me to play myself off. Play me off, go to commercial. And then the music goes, and then everybody goes, yay! And then they take the Emmy away because they've only got one to pass out. And then Gil stands up and he whispers in my ear, and he says, don't forget who was with you when you won your first Emmy. And he leaves. And this is not 97 now, this is like 96, because it leads up to me directing in 97. And so later, about 3 weeks later, I got a call from Gil, and he goes, can you meet me in Westwood at Tanino's restaurant on Westwood Boulevard? I go, yeah. Now, and the people are saying, he's going to ask you to do the Oscars. I'm going, I don't know that. I mean, why would he ask me to do the Oscars? I don't, Jeff does the Oscars. I don't know. I mean, mind you now, during that time, Quincy Jones had done it with David Salzman, and, Alan Carr had done it, and Gil had done it. More people are doing it again this year. And so I go to lunch with Gil, and he goes, I loved how you used the Steadicam. Congratulations on your Emmys. And he goes, I just got to tell you, I want to make a change. I just want to make it. I'm not going to go into details. And he goes, and I want you to do the Oscars. And I said, you're kidding. And he goes, no. And I said, I'm blown away. He goes, I got to tell you something. This is going to change your life. And I said, I say so. I said, it's the biggest variety show, award show on television. It celebrates the art of filmmaking. I go, as a matter of fact, I go, you really are my hero. He goes, how do you mean that? I said, because you're the dean at UCLA of film, television, and theater, and you took the UCLA from the number 5 slot that it slipped to back to number 1. And I said, so that's as important to me as you asking me to do the Oscars. And so he said to me, people are going to ask you to do the weirdest things. There's nothing like this show. And, all I ask is, that, your loyalty, and that you're going to have to do 3 shows, and you're going to have to, it's going to be really complex, but you can do it. And I've watched you work, and we made a bond that day that to this day, I saw him this week for lunch, that I would never do anything with that in any way could not help Gilbert Cates. And that was how I got that first Oscars. And to this day, as the producers changed, and I lived through 4 sets of producers, I would always call Gil and say, Gil, they've asked me to do it with these new producers. You're not doing it. What do you want me to do? And he would always say, Louis J., I've already talked to those producers. I told them they've got to have you. And that's just the kind of guy that he is. He changed my life professionally, because that was a very high profile show. He also changed my life because he was a man. He was a man's man. He was president of the Directors Guild. He was secretary treasurer. He negotiated all the contracts, which was bringing money to me and so many of the people in the guild. He protected our health plans, even up to the last Oscars we did last year. He and Michael Apted and Jay Roth all tried to solve that strike that was coming. And it just goes on. And this man is, I have to say this, and I hope that this ends up on the YouTube. This man taught me something that I never really understood, and that was, the importance of being a nurturing individual. There was not anybody that Gil did not walk down the hallway in an office, from craft service all the way down. I felt egalitarian because I came from the ranks, and I love my teams and my crews, but not the heart and spirit that Gil had. He just made you feel on any given day at any given time that you were the most important thing in his life when he was speaking with you. And to this day, he's still that man. I think if we were to give one gigantic big award, a party, anything for anybody in this business right now, it's for Gilbert Cates.
In the 11 years you've directed the Oscars, 1997 to 2008, this year.
12, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
What's changed the most from the first the first one you directed to the most recent one you directed, technologically, conceptually?
Technologically, on the Oscars over the 12 years that I've directed them, in '97 I already had some steady cams that were available. We got more sophisticated single-man jibs versus Lumicranes. That helped a lot because it started the sweep and glide that I could use in more places. A couple more advancements like fly cams and rail cams, more lipstick cams, just other ways of shooting it. But what really changed? Not really a lot changed, simply because the Academy Awards is the highest achievement, an award for the highest achievement in film that you can get. And remember that motion pictures was the first moving art form, so consequently it's going to be 100 years old and more. They were giving out the same awards that they were giving out 100 years ago at the dinners, or 80 years ago, or however long it gets, it's going to be the 80th. And so you still had costumers and sound mixing, sound editing. Animation came along, animated films came along, and that 12 years, that was a difference. But still, in the final analysis, that show in particular, it gave away 22 of the 26 awards went to technical craftsmanship. This is something that the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences might do at the dinner because there's so many categories. And so in the 12 years, the viewership dropped on that show in terms of how many people watched it, I think, because now came along the SAG Awards, which were all acting, and then various permutations of cinematique and whatever have you. And really in the final analysis, people want to see the stars, yes, but when it comes to movies, you want the masses, if you will, to have seen one blockbuster like Titanic, the highest rated year, and then they turn the channel on because they're going to see everything to do with Titanic. Now, over the 12 years and the way the films are made, there are so many independent films. There's so many different kinds of films. It wasn't like it was in the golden era of filmmaking where Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It wasn't the star system. So consequently, it was fractured. And that's the big change in 12 years, is that the fractured type of motion picture, there's 10 great films, there's 5 great films, there's 20 great films, but for a television audience to watch that show, they don't need to watch that show. And I think that that's the declining ratings in that, and again, the declining ratings in Grammys, the declining ratings in the Emmys, that they don't really need to see that show when the Nielsen bug is rating them, because they can later watch it on their DVRs or they can do something else.
Okay.
Those are the changes.
Word association. I'm going to name an Oscar host that you worked with. Give me a quick comment. Okay?
This is going to be hard.
A quick comment about each one. Billy Crystal.
Funny guy, all the way across. Catskills, Borscht Belt, all around. Producer, director, writer, played multiple characters. Genius.
Steve Martin.
Genius. Singular. Manic, depressive, quiet. He'd be the first to say it. I worked with Steve Martin when he was the opening act for the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band in Long Beach on Don Kirshner's rock concert in 1973, where he did balloon animals on head, arrow through head, microphone on nose, and he got shot off the stage by nail guns because the kids came thinking they were going to see Mott the Hoople, and instead they got Steve Martin. And then the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. And then later, his brilliance on Saturday Night Live was unparalleled. But then when he came to host the Oscars, he was a Steve Martin that had always been the Steve Martin that was, singular, alone, sat in a room with Gil. They looked at the board. On his computer, he typed his own copy, his jokes, and then he printed it out and gave it to him. Then he would get in the car and tell the driver, don't talk to me, just take me home, and he'd leave. And I respect him for his genius, but he's a different guy.
Whoopi Goldberg.
Whoopi Goldberg, movie star, outspoken, feminist, genius, brilliant, fair, tough, knows what she wants, very, very busy, has a lot on her plate, so consequently, the times that she did do the Oscars, it was difficult for her. I could see why she couldn't do it every year because she has a lot going and it takes a lot to do it.
Chris Rock.
Chris Rock is like George Carlin, God bless George, is a very, very astute, intelligent comedian. I'm not so sure people understand that. The way, the things that he says and what he does with words, his observations of life, his self-effacing manner, very open policy. His dressing room was across from mine. The doors were open. He writes a lot of his own stuff. I liked having him on the Oscars. He gave it a different slant. I like him as a movie star, and I like his stand-ups. He's a ultimate talent.
Jon Stewart.
I love Jon Stewart. I love you, John. I love you. John, it was, I will have to say, the most fun I have with John. John was a guy's guy. His doors were open. He has a young staff of writers. He's totally stuck. Now that Bush is gone, John, you'll have no material to work with. You might not even have a television show. But John is a lovely guy, a funny man, very smart. This is a very well thought out, very educated group of writers and show run by John. That's him. But he's the guy that would come in the morning and he'd go, hey, I had these nuts flown in from New York. You should taste them. They're great. You okay? You okay? You okay? Love John. He's a great guy. And you know what? He's, again, like I think you have to stay all the way accessible and down to earth. He's a big star. But, when I won my Emmy and he won his Emmy and he came up to me and gave me a big hug and a kiss and called and invited me to his shows and other people too. He's just a good guy. He's a good guy.
As the director of the Oscars.
Oh, is it about me again?
It's about an opinion of yours. I
have no opinion.
As the director of the Oscars, what makes a good host?
What makes a good host when I am directing the Oscars? I think a good host has to, one, come with their own brand of comedy, find a couple of times within the 3.5 to 4 hours to let the audience see that comedy, make them laugh, and then they have to pretty much, be humble enough to just be kind of the traffic cop, because there are so many awards that have to be given in a 3.5 hour attempt. And there's a lot of film packages. So just the whole idea of saying it's not going to be 3.5 hours of me is what separates the hosts. If you've got a host that wants to do a lot of comic bits on the show, it's gonna make the show long. I don't think that any of the hosts that I've experienced in the 12 years that I've done it have abused that in any way or have expected to do it. As a matter of fact, each one of them has brought their own moment of great comedy. Whoopi did it one year by wearing different costumes. Billy's films we always look forward to. Jon Stewart had very clever material. Steve was Steve Martin. Chris was Chris. And so I think that they picked their moments to do it, their thing, and then they did it. Also, it's real important to be in the wings and listen to the speeches so that when somebody says something that's funny or strange, that they can come out right after and comment on it. So they have to be an active participant in the show, not just go into the wings and say, knock on my door when it's time for me to come out again.
Also, as the director of the Oscars, you had to juggle your working relationships with various groups or entities. So let me just ask you briefly about those, starting with the Academy Motion Pictures, in terms of how has that worked through the years, and is ratings a big concern in that?
With the academies, my relationships with the academies?
Yeah, of motion pictures for the Oscars.
Academy of Motion Pictures.
Yeah.
The relationship with the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, I'm a gun for hire. I come in there, I do 3 shows for them. I do the nominations, I do the SciTech, and then I do the main show. They have a point of view. They have their own committees. They have their own governors. There's Bruce Davis, who's the head of it all. There's a different president every couple of years, and then there's a different producer every other year, and I hope to get hired back. I have tremendous respect for what that academy does, which is the preservation of film, but they're insular, and I wouldn't expect it to be any other way because I don't make films. I do television. So I respect what it is they want done, and I try to do it the way they want it done, and still bring my touch to it. But I know Rick Robertson and Rich Miller and each person who's responsible, Mikhail Kaufman and Leslie Unger and the various people. It's just a handful of people that really run that academy. But then you have the board of governors, and those are guys that represent each of the divisions that have been there for many, many years. And then there's 5,000 members. So it's an insular group, but I feel blessed to have been able to, for 12 years, make pictures for that academy.
Is ratings a factor in who gets hired or who gets hired back?
Ratings, which we're talking about, is the Nielsen ratings. The only company that, with somehow 2,500 houses or 5,000 or 7,000 houses and their meters, can tell you exactly how many people and what age and what demographic watched your show. I live by the Nielsen's on my own show, An Evening of Stars for the United Negro College Fund. I can't say that they don't have the ultimate power over the failure or success of a show, but I can tell you this much. If you don't get the Nielsen ratings, then the advertisers aren't happy. And if the advertisers aren't happy, then they don't want to give you money to make the show. And if they don't give you money to make the show, then you and I aren't sitting here doing this interview because nobody gives a shit. So they have a tremendous amount of import to get the rating. However, in this day and age, as we've spoken about earlier, you cannot look at the rating system the same way as you did in the early days of radio, because it goes back to then, and how many people were listening and how many eyeballs. You have to be smart about it. And Nielsen is trying to be smart about it by monitoring DVRs, digital video recordings, doing 3-day ratings. Now it's a new kind of a thing where they're going, some people don't watch the show until they backlog 3 episodes of it. So it's kind of the only game in town, and it's always been the only game in town. Reason being that the guys that are still at the head of these networks are in their 80s and their 90s. When you really look deep, when you really look to the old money that runs these corporations and these businesses, The Nielsen system is not broken in their mind. They don't want to learn a new system. They don't want a new system. It's the only system they've ever gone by. So why change the rules to Formula One racing, because they've been pretty much the same for 60, 70, 80 years, whatever the case may be. But without those ratings today, it's very hard to say that you had a successful show. You could lay off a dog of a show and get great ratings, and people will think that you're God's gift to humanity. And unfortunately, it's the name of the game. But what does it really mean? What does it really mean? I mean, you just have to ask yourself, what does it really mean? Where there's an advantage is in cable television, though they too rate now. HBO rates, Showtime rates, even though they're subscription television. But the guy who gets the ratings and does shows that gets ratings, that's the guy who gets hired.
The networks, when you're directing the Oscars, are there censorship issues? Do you run on a 7-second delay?
We run on a 5-second delay. And, we always have run on most of the live shows on delays in case somebody says fuck and you need to bleep it. It's again, we're living in a holdover system in the way we view television and media today, because you can watch pornography on the internet on 300,000 pop-up pages every time you open it up, and then you can watch pornography on Playboy Channel, but you can't say fuck on commercial television because the FCC says you can't say it. And we have the Janet cam for Janet Jackson's nipple falling out, yet they rescinded that and they said it was okay. So we, not unlike our political system, have a hybrid now. And why are we running on the delay? And why can you say certain things? It's just how it's always been done. There's always been a censor. And so, yes, we have to run with the delay. And is it necessarily good or bad? I'm not so certain. But I guess what the thought is that if we're on television between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. and our kids are watching your show, we don't want them to hear anything that they're not already hearing, at school or emailing or IMing each other. So it's like got to be looked at again. But then, yes, we do run with the delays.
In those 12 years you've worked with Gil Cates, you mentioned several of those times, but when the other producers came in, what was that like in terms of, A, the fact that it was a new producer, and B, how do those relationships work? I mean, did they vary depending on the producer?
You okay back there? You all? Okay. In the 12 years that I've directed the Oscars, I've had a handful of really great producers. Gilbert Cates is like, as I say, the man who started me and the man I hope to finish with. I also had Richard and Lily Zanuck, and that was just like historical to walk into Richard's office and having followed his career and his father's career and Lily's career, and to go in there and to meet them to see if I was going to be able, we were going to make a fit. And the only question I'd asked the first time, I think it was Richard and Lily were the first set of producers that I worked with after Gil. I just said to them, I looked around and Richard had so many Oscars there and Peabodys and Golden Globes, and I just said to them, why do you want to do this? I mean, this is like television, 26 awards, 24 awards people don't want to see. Richard goes, I don't want to do it. Lily wanted to do it, and she woke me up one night and said she wanted to do it, so I said, okay, we'll do it. And he was so funny, and she laughed, and in fact, I mean, I think it was great that we had them, and he was in the midst of either making Planet of the Apes or another big feature, but she wanted to do it, and I think the film producers all think like it'd be great to do the Oscars. I mean, because it's for them. I mean, the same way producers want to do the Emmys, it's the award for the work that they do, and they were just terrific, and we hit it off. And but it's a big learning curve. The next set of then Gil and I came back together. Then the next person I worked with was Laura Ziskin. And she was doing Spider-Man simultaneously, and she was one hell of a pistol producer and a great lady. Again, there's no ranking. Like I say, Gil's my man, but in talent, they're all so talented, and Laura was so talented. And each one of them, I think the thought of the Academy is that each new producer is going to infuse a new, what it is they like about the idea of filmmaking. Sadly, the show is supposed to be 3 hours. It usually ends up being 3 hours and 30 minutes. Sometimes it's 4 hours and 30 minutes. And in New York, they're getting ready to go to work for the next day. It's gone. They're not watching it. So it's hard to understand that in giving out 26 awards, that if you just gave out the 26 awards at 3 hours and 30 minutes, you'd have 15 minutes left to do any special film packages, any tributes, any Thalbergs, any Elia Kazan tributes, anything like that. And so, but Laura did a great job at it. Then I worked with Joe Roth. He was a studio head, a director. He was... a pistol. He really knew his stuff. Great relationships with stars. That's what's always interesting too, is the presenters are brought on by the producers, and so you get a great cross section. Joe did a hell of a job, but he's making a lot of pictures at his company, Revolution, and then we came back to Laura again, and she was in the middle of Spider-Man 3, but she came up with some great ideas. So I just was fortunate enough, there's a change afoot this year, but I say that I was, blessed to have gotten 12 great years thanks to Gil getting me aboard, and I really had a great time with all these producers. So I thank them and the Academy for having me be their guy.
Let's talk about some of the things that happened while you're actually directing live the Oscars. Number one, with the whirlwind that's happening in the truck, how difficult is it to listen to the content of what either presenters or winners say, and when they start to go on maybe some kind of a political diatribe or something, how do you handle that?
This is a very good question, and Yuval knows because he shot me doing that. It's imperative that I listen to the speeches because my whole story is about what they're saying, and I've got a second guess before they get to the payoff. There's somebody in the room tonight that was such an influence on me when I was in Italy, and Roberto Benigni. It's Sophia Loren. She's talking about Roberto Benigni. Take 13. I'm on Benigni, and it's Roberto Benigni. So I have to second guess what they're saying. So I have my audio pot in the booth, which is very unheard of, because in the old days, as you know, coming from the network, the technical director had the audio control in the booth, and it was set at one level. But I have it because if it gets noisy behind me, or I'm hearing periphery that we're losing a camera, I'm hearing all this periphery stuff, I crank that sound up so loud that people in the truck going, is he hard of hearing? I crank it up because I don't want to miss a thing that they're saying. And it's imperative that I hear what it is, and I capture when they talk about my mother is her mother with us? Is she dead? Who's got the mother? 13's got it. Take 13. My mother, I'm on the mother. I encourage the cameraman to turn their head, click on and tell me if you've got the shot. I go, 14, is that the wife? Is that the wife? Is that take 14, it's the goddamn wife now. Back to 3, take it. I'm listening, we're guessing. It's just this kind of trying to pick it off. If you go up there and you go, I am in such great company, I can't believe I won over these other 4 fine actresses. Wheel, 13, 14, 12, 11, 10, 3. There's a close-up of every single nominee. And then people would go, how do you do that? And I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you how I do it. But I know that is a factor that's going to happen. So like Bill Parcells or, the Titans that are 8-0, I know what defenses are coming at me. I studied it. So I know certain things that are going to happen. I listen for them. And because I know that, the requirements of the camera crew, it's laid out like a football team. The 6 frontline cameras are the nose tackle, the 2 guards and the tackles, our 2 tight ends, the steady cams. And we're either going to flank or we're going to do something if this event should happen in the live show. If they thank the others, we're going to the wheel. If we go to the wheel, certain things have to happen, but everybody knows when I say wheel, bam, they're there. When I go flank, then they know to move. And because I know what's happening, somebody's coming up the aisle. Then I have eyes and ears, and it's audibling all the time. So I have to be able to hear it. Now, when they go off book was your question. When their time is up, Gil, Laura, people are sitting behind me. Laura doesn't like to play anybody off, but Gil goes, if you pull out a list and you start thanking your agent, your high school teacher, I'm going to play you off. Well, I got to be careful. I get the cue from him sometimes. He'll go, just take it when you get the next breath and do the playoff music because we got to get off the air. Well, there were times and have been times where I was a little fast on the trigger, and it's a fine line, and I'll take responsibility for it. One in particular was when Cuba Gooding Jr. won, and he got up there for Jerry Maguire. I loved the picture. I saw it. I loved the moment where is he coming back to life? The wife's calling Tom Cruise. He's laying out there. He's made the touchdown, but is he in a coma? And he wins for that movie. And he comes to the stage. He goes, I am so blessed. What a great movie. This is so fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Play him off. He said, thank you. He's done. It's a short speech. He's going, no. Don't play me off. I'm just getting started. And Gil's going, let it go. And I'm going, I'm going to let it go. I go, I'm going to leave the music in. So we left the music in, and he kept on doing the speech over the music. And instead of cutting the music out, I'm going, we're getting the Jerry Maguire moment. Tom Cruise is standing up. Tom Hanks is standing up. Steve Martin's standing up. They're going, go on. Don't let him take you off the field. And then finally he finishes off, and I considered that a great save. And that was a good moment. One moment, I thank God that I caught it in time and I heard it, was Adrian Brody coming on stage for the Holocaust film. What was it called?
The Pianist? Was it The Pianist?
The Pianist, yeah. And so there was this very heavy film where he survives the Holocaust, and he comes on stage and he gives Halle Berry the kiss. And that was great because I stayed with him. And then he's being, Adrian Brody. He's kind of caustic. And I'm just about to play him off. And then he starts to talk about the Holocaust. And just as he's talking about all the Jews that died during the Hitler-esque period, I'm going, play! Oh, don't play him! Don't play! Stop! Don't play the music! He's talking about the Holocaust. I mean, I don't want to see it in the trades. Horvitz plays off Holocaust survivors. So it's a tricky moment. It's a very tricky moment, but it is a bundle of fun because you really listen. And, there's a lot of people behind me, executives, there's stuff going on, and I'm cranking the sound. But there's certain times where I've got to go quiet, because, I've got to really hear what they say. And that's that.
And what about when they do get political? What do you do?
I don't make the call on the political because let's say, for starters, let's say that, Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins are coming out. I'm going, political, stand by, immediately I know, okay? All right, Shirley MacLaine, she might channel. I mean, I pretty much know, who's coming on as presenters, who are the potential winners, and what oddities they might be bringing with them. So that is also part of the study the game film prior to the live show. And the political aspect of it, nobody wants to hear it. It's not the forum for it. And that I really kind of leave to the producers to make that call. But I'll be the first to say, let's just play her off before she even starts talking, because she's got something to say. And she's a hell of an actress. I love her. I mean, she's great. Just don't use it's a celebration of film tonight.
Okay. We're going to change.